Hey guys, I don't know how this snuck by, but in addition to being Jewish American Heritage Month, it's also Asian American Pacific Islanders Heritage Month. So I'm going to go ahead and call my friend. We're going to honor Yokozuna, a Samoan in the wrestling industry that is so memorable and gives just perfect description to the term larger than life. This guy was amazing, larger than life. 26 years old, 500 pounds, and could move. You know, the internet wrestling community, after he passed especially, has just had a blast with the fact that he had such girth. But let me explain something to you. Maybe people could start to consider this when they want to go down that simple road of making fun of him because of his weight, okay? For Samoans in general, the tiny Samoan islands have among the highest rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes in the world, and diet and weight-related health issues have been rising in the Pacific nations since the 70s. Now, 1 in 3 residents of American Samoa suffers from diabetes. So you see, it was in the genes. Samoans are very large people, and they've got to watch it. Did you also know that African American men have to watch for very similar health risks? And the point being is that this guy couldn't help it. But the point I'm trying to make is how impressive that a guy that is as large as the first electronic cars could move like that, and on record is the youngest World Wrestling Entertainment Champion in history, because he won that belt and carried that belt for 14 months at 26 years old. Now his kin, and he is kin proudly, and this man is proud to call him kin as well, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock on Yokozuna. He was a sweetheart of a guy, always jovial and happy and cracking jokes. It's just a shame to see that he's gone. He's contributed so much to our industry and the WWF, WWE. And he has. He drew so much money on top and had a believability factor from the get-go. Go and YouTube search AWA Coquina Maximus. That kid must have been 19 years old at the time. Unbelievable. Bonsai, that was the last word many of WWE's top superstars heard when they faced the imposing Yokozuna. Standing 6'4" and nearly 600 pounds, the sumo wrestler squashed legends like Bret the Hitman Hart, The Undertaker, and Hulk Hogan on his way to becoming one of the most dominant WWE champions of all time. Trained by the Wild Samoans, he debuted in WWE in 1992, managed by Mr. Fuji, who was guiding his career. The pairing was effective from the very beginning. If Yoko size didn't seal victory, a handful of salt from the meddling Fuji would. And I love that salt thing. I don't know if you guys have ever even gotten just a speck of salt in your eye, but I love that. I love that Fuji was with him. What a great pairing, and what a phenomenal way to smarten Rodney up. You know what I'm saying? And that was his real name, was Rodney. Now, it's just amazing to me that this guy was able to do what he did. And right before he passed, I was working for a promoter who would call me in to do certain things, and one of the things was book talent. He had a sold show somewhere, and he wanted me to get a hold of Yokozuna, Rodney, to see if he could make that show. Well, I'd heard through the grapevine that Rodney had just gotten too big. And when I called him and we talked, and again, we barely talked about wrestling. We barely talked about the date. It was just a nice, jovial, happy man who I heard at the time was in really bad health. And the proof to that is that shortly after that, he passed when he did take independent booking over in England, or independent tour over in England. He just didn't have the wherewithal that he once had, even though he was a young man. And once again, I'm going to state, it wasn't entirely his fault. First of all, you heard the health risks of all Samoans and the health issues, from people in Samoa and American Samoa. The other thing is that eating disorders. Food is an addiction for some people. It's a disease, and I don't think that the jokes are apropos in any way, shape, or form. But I am going to close this honoring Yokozuna with a funny joke. Now remember, Owen Hart, who everybody knew and knows now in the industry, was one of the great ribbers of all time. Two of the greatest ribbers in the history of pro wrestling were Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, and second would be Owen Hart. Well, we were doing tapings, and when I would do extra work with WWE, I was doing it at the time for the money and possible networking, and I got over with The Office. I got over with Vince himself, but I also got over with the boys. And I always got along with Rodney. When we would go to the tapings would be so long, and you'd gather outside in front of a bunch of monitors, and I would always sit next to Rodney and some other guys that I felt comfortable and friendly with. And once again, very friendly guy. It was amazing to see a guy that size that was that believable in the ring. He had a face like a baby. His skin was like a baby. But man, when he put that mug on, that working mug on with that baby face, it was just some scary shit. Now, like I says, Owen's a ribber, and this was the second night, and we were kind of in a semicircle around the monitor watching, and Owen had stopped at a truck stop or something and bought this calendar of enormous women, and these things used to be popular before everything got PC. And these girls had folds on top of folds on top of folds, and were probably 5'4", Rodney was 6'4", and they weighed about the same. So it was half a rib calendar, but also half a fetish calendar, because believe it or not, that is, or at least was, a fetish, girls being that big. And I'm sure they were paid very well for the calendar, so I don't want to go into the PC bullshit. But anyway, I saw this in the beginning, and I saw it before it got to Rodney, who I was sitting next to when I was getting up and going back to my place. And I thought, oh, you son of a bitch. I don't want to be there when it gets to Rodney. I don't want to be there when it gets to Yoko. So anyway, I forget about the calendar because everybody's having a blast with it. It had gone through about 20 guys going back and forth and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden it gets to Rodney, and Owen and whoever else was with him that was in on the rib kind of got up and got behind Rodney to see him sell it, to see what the reaction was. Now, again, this wasn't done to be mean, because Owen was a friend. This wasn't some jagoff troll on the internet trying to be an asshole. This was Owen Hart effing with a friend of his and a comrade of his that he had been on the road with for quite a while. So Rodney gets the calendar, and I'm stuck sitting there, and I'm just facing forward, trying not to sell because I didn't know how to act. I didn't want to hurt Rodney's feelings, and I certainly didn't want to get any points taken away with my political statute at the time with the talent roster, and it would have been in true Owen Hart form to somehow get the heat on me based upon my reaction to Rodney's reaction. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching this going on, and Hart's winking at me, and whoever else was involved at the rib was winking at me and waiting and watching. And, I'm telling you, a few minutes had gone by. Rodney actually perused the calendar with a look on his face like he'd smelled a horrible fart. He hands the calendar to me on one specific girl, and the calendar's open, and he looks over at me and says, I feel so bad for her. How did she let herself get like that? And everybody started laughing, and Rodney realized the rib. Okay, guys, I proudly honor Yokozuna once again, a man who really gives literal meaning to the term larger than life. This is Asian American and Pacific Islander American Heritage Month, sponsored by Premier Pro Wrestling, without any YouTube commercials. So please be cool, like, subscribe, and you can find your way into in the description to see links on how to support Premier Pro Wrestling.